What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA. We're here for, of course, UFC Vegas 33 preview. We've got Uriah Hall versus Sean Strickland. And, of course, later on in the video, we'll be talking about Bellator 263 because we can't preview this card without previewing the absolutely beautiful card that is Bellator 263. Of course, this weekend, they're going head-to-head both at the same time on the second night. Usually Bellator's on a Friday. But tonight, it looks like Bellator's going to be winning the rankings, isn't it? Obviously, the UFC have put out a weaker card. No thought they're wrong. They've lost a few fights on this card. 11, I believe it was 12, but for some weird reason, one's been put back on. But Bellator's certainly got the starlight tonight and the star power tonight. But Uriah Hall, Sean Strickland, it's a fight to be looking forward to. Of course, Uriah Hall's last performance was that unfortunate leg break that occurred to Chris Weidman a couple months ago back at UFC 262, I believe. And of course, you know, it was one of those moments Uriah Hall had put all that work into the camp, as did Weidman, and the first kick that was thrown by Weidman got checked by Uriah Hall, and that was the end of the fight. Now, of course, that fight, for some weird reason, got called the only fight to not have a significant strike landed, and it broke some sort of record, which was, harsh on Chris Weidman due to the nature of the injury. And I'm sure Uriah Hall, albeit wants that win on his record, he doesn't want it in that fashion. Uriah Hall seems like a good guy, someone who's very respectful, a proper martial artist. He carries that discipline and that attitude of the martial artist with him. But of course, he's put up on a 4-fight win streak now. He beat Anderson Silva before that, of course, via finish in round 4 back in 2020, on Halloween of 2020, of course. Before that, he beat Anto Carlos Jr. in a split decision, and Bevan Lewis before that. So, he's put on a really good performance, and it's his longest win streak since 2012. And there's always questions, and there is always questions about his mentality, especially since he joined the UFC, about his mind not being, and he's one of the most talented and gifted athletes we've seen. You see that spinning heel kick all the time from his days in the Ultimate Fighter. You always see the chat with him and Chael Sonnen, and he's got someone. He should have been up there with the greats, but unfortunately, he couldn't match the physicality and the technique that he possessed with the mentality. But it seems like he's got that in order now. Now, is it too little too late at 37 years of age? Maybe, but he's certainly putting a good mark in this middleweight division. And should he get a win against Sean Strickland, obviously he's higher up in the rankings, so it's hard to see him progress too much further up. But he'd probably break into the top 6, maybe top 5. You could see him jumping Darren Till or Jack Manson. Of course, Uriah Hall, in his sights, he wants to be fighting Israel Adesanya, the Robert Whitakers and Paulo Costas. Do I think he wins those fights? Possibly not, probably not even. But he still has to be given respect. And of course, Israel Adesanya, the champion, is going to be facing Robert Whitaker in that rematch, maybe in November or December. But many would think, if he beats Robert Whitaker, he's already beaten Paulo Costas, he's beaten Marvin Vettori. Obviously, Jared Cannonier needs to get a win or two before he can fight for the title. He's supposed to be fighting Paulo Costa, of course. So it's really interesting to see where Uriah Hall would fit into this with a win tonight. Because of course, many think, Darren Till's probably the only one left to rival Israel Adesanya in terms of opponents he's not faced yet at Adesanya. But Uriah Hall could certainly be one of those, and he gets a win tonight, an impressive win tonight against Sean Strickland. He's definitely on his way. He definitely won't be the number 1 contender tomorrow if he wins tonight. But he's probably 1, maybe 2 fights away from getting a title shot, you could say. For Sean Strickland, of course, this is his biggest fight of his career so far, 23-3. But Uriah Hall, the name that's on that resume, if he gets a win tonight, is absolutely huge. Especially a Uriah Hall that's now got a win against Chris Weidman and Anderson Silva. It boosts Sean Strickland's career even further, with Uriah Hall having those on his record, should Sean Strickland get the win tonight. Of course, previously, he's on a 4-fight win streak himself against Krzysztof Jotko that he beat by decision back in May. So a quick turnaround for him. He knocked out Brendan Allen before that. Brendan Allen, came back and had a fantastic performance in his previous fight just last week. He beat Jack Marshman by unanimous decision and Nordine Taleb by a ground and pound in round 2. So both of these fighters are coming to this into good form. It's going to be a shame to see one of those lose, but of course that's the nature of the sport. Of course, it is Sean Strickland's first main event, so how is he going to deal with that pressure, that added pressure of making the walk second to last tonight, obviously in the UFC Apex, which now has got fans in it. How many? I think it's 150, 200. So not the biggest crowd he's ever going to be walked out in front of. But definitely that pressure is going to be there at this first main event. And of course, Uriah Hall has been in a numerous amount of main events, of course. So Uriah Hall's definitely got the experience on his side, but Sean Strickland packs a punch. And let's have a look at the tail of the tape. Of course, you've got 18-9 up against 23-3-1 for Sean Strickland, 6'1" versus 6'1" height advantage there for Sean Strickland. Both 185 in the middleweight division, 79.5 versus 76 reach, 3.5-inch reach advantage there for Uriah Hall. And he's also got an inch and a half in the leg reach advantage as well. Now, funnily enough, something that's not been made too much of this, but if you watch Chael Sonnen, he's said it every time this topic's come about, that Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland were former training partners. When Chael Sonnen was training with Uriah Hall, they were training at the same spot as Sean Strickland, and they'd crossed paths. And now he'd never, openly witnessed Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland change, but putting two and two together. You've got two middleweights in a gym. It's likely they're going to be training together. And actually, Sean Strickland came out today and said, in the week in the build-up to this, saying, Uriah Hall, they're friends. They're on good terms with each other, but their method into training is a lot different. Sean Strickland's very sort of decisive. Very much gonna look to break down. Make you hurt. It's gonna be a tough sparring session. Whereas Uriah Hall, in the words of Sean Strickland, was someone who would be very nice. So come on, we're good friends. We'll go and do something after this, and then he pull out a spinning kick on you. So almost get you by surprise, you could say, in sparring. But Sean Strickland, as you would probably seen, had a video released a couple weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago now, training with a BJJ specialist. And he saw his reaction to a couple of moves that the BJJ specialist done on him, to the point where he walked out of the training session. So you could say he's a bit of a hothead, or you could just say he's someone who's very rigid and someone who's very much got his routine now down, you could say. And he's very experienced now. He's in the prime of his career. Obviously, he didn't want to get injuries going into the biggest fight of his career, which is understandable. But he's 30 years of age. He is coming into his prime. So he's got 27 fights, or 27th fight tonight, of course, under his record. So he's very experienced for his age. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does come out tonight. I think I do think Uriah was a favourite tonight, just because he's so much more experienced in terms of those main events and those big fights on the big cards that he's had in the past. But again, if his mind doesn't come into this, at 100%, if he's at 80-70%, Sean Strickland can get the finish here tonight, and especially in those 30 rounds where he's going to be the most powerful, when he's not going to be have 20 minutes in the gas tank and his gas tank is empty. It's going to be someone who's very dangerous. But again, Uriah Hall can pick out a highlight at any point in the fight as well, especially going into that fight with win against Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman, albeit a Chris Weidman win was under different circumstances to the Anderson Silva win. He's going to have a lot of excitement and pride going into this, almost feeling invincible, you could say, because of the two legends he's beaten before him. And of course, that doesn't mean he's going to be overlooking Sean Strickland. No way at all. And let's have a look at the middleweight rankings. Sean Strickland's 13th or 14th in the middleweight rankings right now. Obviously, Robert Whittaker Adesanya is going to be the next title shot, of course. Paulo Costa's taken the lead of the absence so far. It's going to be interesting to see where he comes back. He was supposed to fight Jared Cannonier, of course. You got Marvin Vettori coming off that loss against Adesanya, of course. Derek Brunson's made a resurgence in this division now. And we've got Jack Manson and Darren Till, who are currently coming off the losses. Darren Till and Derek Brunson should be meeting in the Octagon on September 4th, whether that's going to be in Vegas or London. It seemingly looks like more so that it's going to be in London, of course. Las Vegas even. With the way that the pandemic is at the moment, with travel and the lack of time between now and September 4th to get tickets sold and etc. It's just easier for the UFC now with the Apex to just put on an event there, get all the fighters in one area and location, and put on a fantastic event. Of course, unfortunately for the UK fans, it would have been a very stacked card, with Darren Till, Paddy Pimblett, Molly McCann on that card, Leroy Murphy. So it would have been one of the best cards that we've seen in London and in the UK for a long time. So unfortunately, we're not going to see that. But for the UK fans, hopefully put on a good time for us at least, and it's going to be a fantastic fight. But tonight we're focused on Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland. Obviously, if Uriah Hall wins, you probably see him moving up above Jack Comanche. You'd probably say at 6, maybe up to 5th, depending on the result. but you can't see him being up too much higher than that. Obviously, if Sean Strickland wins, he'll be jumping Uriah Hall's spot and going into 8th. So yes, it's gonna be interesting to see what really happens. I think this is, obviously the card isn't fantastic, but this fight has potential to be a fantastic fight, and to see one of these two pull off a fantastic performance. In the co-main event, we now got Gloria DePaula versus Shane Byers. Of course, Shane Byers coming through the Contender Series. We've got a couple of Contender Series alumni. Opening the card is Ryan Crisco. If you remember the brothers on the Contender Series last year, he is one of the Crisco brothers, 7-0 undefeated up against Philip Rowe. That would be on just about now, I believe. Obviously, to round out the main card, you got Nicholas Stolzer versus Jared Gooden. There were some question marks on this because this one did get pulled from the card about an hour or two ago. They got reinstated of somewhere between COVID protocols, but doctors have cleared it. Neither of these two have COVID, so the fight's going ahead. Jared Gooden, fantastic welterweight. A lot of power, 17-6 up against Stolzer, who's 12-4. You've got Colin Engen versus Melsik Bakadasarin. Either one against 8-1, so two good prospects in the Featherweight Division. You've got Brian Barberena versus Jason Witt. Now, Brian Barberena's opened up the main card. If you remember his fight with Vicente Luque, a bloodbath, a battle, a war, it's surprising to see him, so far down this card. You could see him as a good co-main event. Brian Barberena, he's 15-7 up against an 18-7 Jason Witt. You've got Chris Grutzamacher versus Rafael Garcia, of course, from Mexico, 12-1 against 14-4. Danny Chavez versus Kai Marco 3 in the Featherweight Division, of course. Ashley Yoda versus Jinyu Frey, 10-6 up against 8-7. That could be a fantastic fight. Potential fight of the night or performance of the night for one of those two if they get a win. Or whoever wins that will probably get a performance of the night bonus even. Ryan Bernard versus Zaruka Adashev. So yes, not the greatest card on paper. Like I said it last week, and it seems to be a running theme. These weaker cards on paper seem to turn out and be some of the most exciting fights and exciting cards in recent times. But yeah, we did. We lost Munir Lazez fighting tonight. Rani Yaha versus Kyunhoo Kang. Yaya tested positive. Obviously, Nika Montana yesterday came out of the hot water for missing weight, 7 pounds up at bantamweight. Of course, she weighed in at 142, 143. So of course that fight did get pulled from the card. Also, Sam Aldi was supposed to fight Askar Askarov versus Alex Perez. That probably would have been a number one contender, but Askarov got injured. So yeah, a huge withdrawal list tonight. And the different reasons, of course, so that's unfortunate. But again, it's going to be a good card to watch, and we'll probably see some rising stars, some good narratives come out of it. And of course, that main event between Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland, someone looking to become a lot closer to that top 5 in that middleweight division, and start, building up a title contention, you could say. And talking about title contention, we of course got Bellator 263, AJ McKee versus Patricio Pitbull. Obviously, this is the finale of that Featherweight Grand Prix, which started 2 years ago now in September 2019. It's been a long slog, isn't it? Of course, 2020 saw a big absence to Bellator and sport as a whole with the COVID-19 and abandonment of sports. But we're here tonight. Obviously, AJ McKee is undefeated at 17-0, a fantastic, prodigy, you could say. A huge prospect, and a win tonight for him does set him into a different stratosphere than what he's in currently. He's talking about being the Floyd Mayweather at the May, being undefeated. He's got this marketability about him, this presence about him where you can start seeing a superstar, start to form. Obviously, his dad's AJ McKee, they fought on the same card. I believe they both got wins, so their first father and son duo to get wins on the same card. He's only 26 years of age, so he's still coming into his prime. And tonight's, of course, his biggest test yet. Obviously, Patricio Pitbull, a legend in Bellator, maybe Mr. Bellator, you could say. In fact, the poster boy, the number one in Bellator MMA. Of course, Pitbull, his last performance was, of course, against Emmanuel Sanchez, which got a submission and guillotine back in April this year. Of course, a fantastic performance. Before that, he obliterated, with all due respect, to Pedro Carvalho with that right cross. A stunning performance from him. And, of course, he opened the tournament against Juan Archuleta, former bantamweight champion. Obviously just recently lost his title to Sergio Pettis, but he's been on a fantastic tear up. He's on a 7-fight win streak at the moment. Of course, Michael Chandler, former UFC title contender, obviously on that resume. Manuel Sanchez before that, unanimous decision win. Daniel Weichel split decision win, and Daniel Strauss guillotine choke. So he's on a fantastic run of form. Of course, he's the lightweight and featherweight champion, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens tonight, especially if he loses. But you could definitely see AJ McKee then turning the gun back to Pitbull and say, right, let's have it at 155, where there's a whole array of problems at the moment. Maybe, if you look at the Bellator rankings, Peter Keeley beat Patricia's brother, Patricio Pitbull, of course, and he's still ranked below him. And rightly, he's probably been the number one contender. I'm sure Irish MMA fans agree with that. And irrelevant of the result of the fight, Peter Keeley has a win against Patricio Pitbull and should be ranked above him rightfully, and probably, fight Patricio Pitbull 155, because these two, especially the two gyms at least, have a big rivalry going back and forth. SVG and the gym of the Pitbull brothers gym. Either that, or you make Patricio versus Peter Keeley 2 for the number one contender. Obviously, Patricio wins that, you're not going to see him fight Patricio. So it is a bit of a mix-up and question mark of what happens with that Bellator lightweight division. Are you going to see maybe another tournament in that format? Bellator are killing the tournaments at the moment. You've got the light heavyweight Grand Prix going on at the moment. Semi-final was announced in October. So yes, but to focus on tonight's featherweight Grand Prix, I have to back AJ McKee here. I think we see a new era done. Of course, he comes to this fantastic form as well. That modified neck crank that we saw against Darren Caldwell back in November of last year. Fantastic performance, a fantastic submission. Derek Campos, Georgi Karakian, Pat Curran, Daniel Crawford, John Texera, of course, in his most recent wins. And, he's got a lot of finishes in there, a lot of submissions. It's going to be interesting to see how he turns up tonight, coming in against a veteran, a legend in Pitbull who's seen it or been there, done it. But AJ McKee certainly coming in with confidence. And if you saw the press conference, it was very Conor McGregor-esque in the way, he stole the belt from Pitbull. Pitbull looks very amped up. He looks very, very aggressive, maybe a little bit emotional, we could say. Maybe that, favours AJ McKee tonight to go into the fight. But yeah, it's definitely a fight of the weekend. Of course, all eyes are on Bellator tonight. And that main event is going to be something phenomenal. I think we see a phenomenal performance from AJ McKee. I do think we see him go to 18-0 with that featherweight title around his waist, and of course $1 million, of course. And it'd be interesting to see where he goes from there. Whether he wants to decide to defend that title, whether he wants to move up and fight Patricio again for that lightweight title, become champ potentially. But it's definitely going to be cool coming from other organisations in the next year or two. You could say if he gets to that 20-0 mark, 22-0 mark, the UFC are going to come calling, especially for that featherweight division. You've got Max Holloway, Volkanovski, you've got Brian Ortega, you've got Zabit Magomed-Sharipov, who's on the sidelines at the moment, potentially coming back. You've got obviously Yair Rodriguez. So there's some big names in there, and AJ McKee would happily, and I think, in my opinion, quite easily, with all due respect, he would fit into that division in the UFC, and definitely be a welcomed addition to that rankings and that division. As much, but Patricio Pitbull and that call up could certainly be a problem, or a problem for Bellator at least, losing Pitbull. Especially we're seeing Michael Chandler with the UFC. We've seen the success he's had, albeit he lost that title shot. He was very close to becoming the lightweight champion, but his performance against Dan Hooker was phenomenal. And of course, he's had 2 fights, one of them being a title shot straight off of his debut. So you could definitely see the same happen for Pitbull. Pitbull could come in and face Max Holloway, or you could put him in there against Ortega. You could put him straight in there for the title, maybe against Volkanovski. You never know. It'd be interesting to see how that would work out. But I definitely see one of these two being in the UFC. In the next 2 years. I think AJ McKee obviously has agent time on his side over Pitbull, but you always see Pitbull putting out subliminal messages about the featherweight division, saying how he's the number one, and maybe it's time to see him test it out, and especially if he wins tonight. Maybe let the lightweight title to go vacant, do Patricio and Peter Keeley, let them fight out in a rematch, and Patricio goes and finds new ventures in the UFC. But for AJ McKee, if he wins tonight, again, moves to 18-0, he becomes an absolute superstar in the making. And, I think he'd be 2 defences away from a UFC call-up himself. But yes, of course, the rest of the card is stacked as well. You've got Mads Burnell versus Emmanuel Sanchez. If Mads Burnell pulls out a fantastic performance, you could definitely maybe see him fighting for the Bellator Featherweight Championship next. And of course, Pedro Carvalho's up there, although he's off 2 losses now, one of those including Pitbull, of course. So yes, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the featherweight division tonight. But the main thing is we find out who becomes the champion tonight and who walks away that $1 million prize. Usman Nurmagomedov, of course, is fighting Manny Muro. You've got Islam Mamedov versus Brent Primus. Brent Primus seems to be very unhappy with this matchup for him. I think he wanted someone in the top 5, top 6 of the Bellator rankings. But Islam Mamedov, fantastic performer as well. Look, Goto Yamaguchi against Chris Gonzalez, Vanessa Porto versus Ilara Joan, Gadsy Rabanov versus Daniel Carey, Kazan Magomed Sharipov versus Jonathan Kyrgios, Johnny Sineros versus Joshua Jones, Georgie Karakian versus Keith Crosby and Brian Moore versus Jordan Winsky. So hopefully a good night for Irish MMA in there as well, with Brian Moore and Keith Crosby fighting and opening up the card at a good time, of course. So yes, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Let's get your predictions down in the comments down below. First of all, for the UFC main event, Uriah Hall versus Sean Strickland, who gets it done, of course, in the Bellator 263 main event. Patricio Pitbull versus AJ McKee, who gets the job done, who comes out as featherweight champion. It's going to be AJ McKee, the new prodigy, the new star of Bellator MMA, or is it going to be the veteran, the king of Bellator, Patricio Pitbull, walks away with that $1 million prize. I'm going to leave it there, guys. I will see you guys for the review. Of course, tomorrow we've got Cage Warriors 126. I'm looking forward to see how Cage Warriors looks stateside, of course, with the first event in the US for a long time for Cage Warriors. Graham Borden doing fantastic work. But of course, enjoy the fights tonight and tomorrow, and we'll see you guys Monday for a review.